Have you ever looked into your sister's eyes while your face was bleeding, while your shoulder screamed out of its socket, your body sliding down cold concrete, and heard her whisper almost tenderly, "You should have signed the mortgage. That was me." Clara Monroe, 32 years old, lying on the floor of my parents' garage, tasting Iron Vision swimming body, refusing to hold me upright. All because I refused to be their guarantor. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you are watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever felt left out by your own family. I can still hear the slam of my father's hand against my cheekbone, the hollow crack of my body hitting the wall, the way the air punched out of my lungs in one violent rush. My knees buckled, my palms slipped in my own blood, and yet somehow I crawled. Across the frost-bitten yard over brittle grass that sliced my skin up the splintered porch steps pounding on the door I once called home. I sobbed, begged, pleaded. "Mom, it's me. Please." But what happened next, I'll never forget. Even the police, hardened by years of domestic calls, said they were horrified. 2 weeks before that night, it had started with a phone call. Vanessa, my younger sister. Her voice as honeyed as I remembered from childhood the tone she used when she wanted something. "Clara, come over Friday. Just us cozy dinner at Mom and Dad's. Dad's even cooking." My instinct said no. With Vanessa, every family dinner was a carefully staged ambush, but she pressed harder. "It's been too long. Dad misses you." Against the gnawing pit in my stomach, I agreed. When I arrived, the Monroe house smelled faintly of roasted chicken and lemon cleaner, too polished, too prepared. Mom's best china glimmered under the dining room lights, the porcelain reserved for Christmases, or when she wanted to impress someone. Vanessa greeted me with an overly tight hug, her perfume clinging to my sweater. "You look tired," she said, voice dripping with false concern. Behind her, my father, Edward Monroe, sat at the head of the table, whiskey glass in hand, shoulders squared like he was presiding over a courtroom. His expression unreadable, practiced. I hung my coat and joined them, forcing a polite smile. At first, the dinner was pleasant enough. Mom ladled soup into our bowls. Vanessa prattled on about her home renovations, and Derek, her husband, bragged about a business deal that I knew from my line of work was already sinking. But then Edward reached under his chair and slid a thick manila envelope across the table. His eyes locked onto mine. "Open it." My stomach dropped. "What's this?" Vanessa leaned forward, elbows on the table, her smile tight. "We're closing on the house soon, but the bank's being difficult. They just need a little extra assurance." "Assurance," I repeated. Edward's jaw tightened. "Your name." "On the mortgage." "Just as guarantor. No big deal." I froze. I worked in finance. I knew what this was. Balloon payments, variable interest, toxic clauses that could drag me into ruin if they defaulted. "You've been denied before, haven't you?" I asked quietly. For the first time, Vanessa's mask slipped. "Temporary credit issues. Freelance income looks bad on paper, you know." Edward's voice hardened, slicing through the air. "That's why we need you. You're the responsible one." It wasn't praise. It was a command. I set my spoon down. My voice shook, but I held it steady. "I can't sign something like this. If anything goes wrong, nothing will go wrong." Vanessa cut me off, her voice sharp, rehearsed. "You think we'd let that happen to you? We're family." That word, family, it sat heavy on the table, thick like smoke, choking me. A net they'd always cast over me, hoping I'd tangle myself in it again. I didn't take the bait. "I'll think about it," I said finally. Edward's jaw clenched, but he didn't push. Not then. The envelope remained between us, heavy as a loaded weapon. I finished my soup without tasting a drop, my mind already spinning through the years of sacrifices they'd buried, the debts I'd covered without recognition. Rachel Kim's words echoed in my head. She'd been my best friend since freshman year of college, the only one who had the courage to tell me the truth. I could still see her in her kitchen arms, crossed steam curling from a forgotten mug of coffee. "Clara, no. If you sign that, you'll be chained to their mistakes forever. They'll never stop asking, because you've always been the one who shows up." Her eyes had softened then, but her voice stayed firm. "You need to ask yourself, what are you losing by keeping them?" Back then, I had no answer. But sitting at that dinner table staring at the envelope, I felt the question burn through me again, and the silence in my chest told me the answer was everything. I tried to pretend the envelope wasn't still sitting on my counter. I stacked bills on top of it, slid it under a magazine, even pushed it into a drawer. But every time I opened the kitchen cabinet or reached for a pen, it was there, quiet, looming, demanding. Rachel noticed before I admitted it. We were at her place again, the smell of fresh coffee filling the kitchen. She leaned against the counter, eyes narrowing when I told her about the second invitation. "Clara, you can't go back there. You know what they're doing." I wrapped my hands around the warm mug she'd given me. "It's just dinner. It's never just dinner with them." I tried to smile, but my chest felt hollow. Rachel's words were ironclad truth, but part of me still hoped for a night where I wasn't a bargaining chip, hoped my family could see me without dollar signs attached. So I went. The Monroe house glowed like a magazine spread. The lace tablecloth, pressed silverware polished to a blinding shine, a roast chicken at the center steaming in buttery herbs. Everything screamed perfect family. Everything screamed trap. Vanessa was already seated, her hair pinned back, a smile sharp enough to slice me open. Derek beside her puffed up, talking about his next big break. Edward at the head knife and fork, neatly placed whiskey glass already half empty. Margaret flitted between the kitchen and dining room, smiling as though she were hosting royalty. When she brushed a phantom crumb from my shoulder, her voice soft, she whispered, "You're just on time." I slipped into the chair between Vanessa and Edward, my heart thrumming with dread. For a while, the conversation floated. Fabric swatches, church committees, Derek bragging like a used car salesman. I chewed without tasting, but when plates were only half empty, Edward leaned back, swirling the ice in his glass. "So he said," his gaze locking onto me like a vice. "Vanessa tells me you haven't signed yet." The room froze. I set my fork down, deliberately steadying my voice. "I'm still considering it." Derek chuckled, his tone dripping smugness. "Considering it's just a signature, Clara. You don't even have your own family to worry about. Why not help your sister start hers?" The words landed like acid. He said them lightly, almost teasing, but the implications seared through me. Because I wasn't married. Because I didn't have children. Because in their eyes, my life mattered less. Mom nodded gently, as though Derek had made a perfectly reasonable point. "Families help each other, darling." I swallowed hard, biting back the storm rising in me. "It's a big financial commitment. I just want to be careful." Edward's smile thinned. "Careful or stingy?" Vanessa laughed under her breath, shaking her head like I was a child refusing to share a toy. The clink of cutlery grew sharp against porcelain. My hands tightened under the table nails, digging into my palms. Edward's voice lowered the way it always did when he was coiling to strike. "You've always thought you were better than the rest of us. You sit with your numbers, your spreadsheets, your nice little apartment, and you think you see every angle. But life isn't a ledger, Clara. Life is sacrifice." The room closed in the smell of roasted chicken turning bitter in my throat. "I'm not better than anyone," I said evenly. "But I know what's at stake if things go wrong." For a second silence. Edward's jaw locked, his glass frozen halfway to his lips. Vanessa smirked. Derek's eyes glittered with amusement. Margaret pretended not to hear, busying herself with wiping an already spotless plate. Dinner dragged in heavy silence. I counted the minutes until I could leave. When I finally stood to take my coat, Edward's voice lashed across the room. "You'll come by later this week. We'll talk privately." It wasn't a request. Every nerve in my body screamed no. My throat tightened, but my mouth, trained by decades of obedience, betrayed me. "Fine." I hated myself for saying it. On Friday afternoon, his call came. No greeting, no softening. Just command. "Swing by the house after work. We need to settle this." I gripped my phone until my knuckles blanched. I could have said no. I could have hung up. But instead, I heard myself reply, "All right." The sun was sinking when I pulled into the driveway. The garage door hung open just enough to duck under. The air inside smelled of motor oil, cold and sharp. Edward stood by his workbench, whiskey in hand. Vanessa leaned against the doorway to the house, arms crossed, her smirk curling like smoke. "Sit," Edward ordered, pointing to the stool across from him. I stayed standing. "You wanted to talk?" His glass clinked against the workbench. His voice was already rising. "This is ridiculous. You're making your sister's life harder over nothing. One signature. That's all. It's not nothing," I whispered. "It's a contract that could ruin me." Vanessa's laugh cut the air, soft and pitying. "You're being dramatic." Edward stepped forward, boots striking concrete. His shadow loomed over me. "I'm your father. I've provided for you your whole life. The least you can do is step up when I ask." The old instinct clawed at me, the one that made me shrink, apologize, fold. But something inside me cracked. "I'm not saying no to hurt you," I said, voice trembling but steady. "I'm saying no because it's dangerous." His face hardened fury, coiling in his jaw. "Dangerous. What's dangerous is a daughter who turns her back on her family." The words struck deeper than any blow, and in that moment I knew whatever came next I wouldn't sign. Edward moved so fast I barely had time to flinch. One shove and my back slammed into the cold wall of the garage. Pain shot through my shoulder, hot and electric, stealing the breath from my lungs. "Dad, stop." The punch came before I finished. A sharp crack across my cheekbone, my head whipping to the side, the metallic taste of iron exploding across my tongue. My knees buckled. I collapsed to the concrete palm, slipping in a warm pool that I realized, horrified, was my own blood. Above me, Edward's chest heaved, face twisted with a rage I'd only glimpsed in childhood, the kind that once made me cower in silence while Mom pretended not to see. Vanessa didn't scream. She didn't rush to stop him. She tilted her head, perfume cloying her voice, calm as if we were at brunch. "You should have signed the mortgage." Her words cut deeper than his fist. I tried to push myself up, but white-hot pain ripped through my shoulder. Dislocated, I realized dimly. My arm dangled useless, every breath shallow and ragged. Edward stood over me, voice low, vibrating with contempt. "You're going to regret this." I forced my eyes to meet his. My lips split as I spoke. "I already do." For a moment I thought he'd hit me again. Instead, he turned sharply, brushing past Vanessa as if I were nothing but trash on the floor. She crouched beside me briefly, her smirk sharp. "You've made a mistake. You can't take back Clara." Then the heavy door clicked shut behind her, locking me in silence. I don't know how long I lay there, cheek pressed to the freezing concrete, the world narrowing to the echo of my heartbeat. The garage reeked of oil and blood, the hum of the freezer the only sound. Finally, instinct forced me to move. I dragged myself inch by inch, my useless arm scraping the other, trembling under the effort. The open garage door framed the night like an escape hatch. When the winter air hit my face, it stung cruel and bracing. I crawled across the driveway, knees tearing against gravel through the brittle grass that crunched beneath me. The porch loomed like a mirage. My hand slipped on the icy railing, but somehow I climbed the steps, collapsing against the front door. I pounded weakly. "Mom, it's me. Please." My voice broke into sobs. "I need help." Inside, muffled voices, my mother's, my father's, calm, deliberate, not rushing to me, not opening the door. I banged harder, forehead pressed to the frame, tears mixing with blood. "Please, don't leave me out here." The voices stopped. The house went still. I knocked again, weaker. Silence. My legs gave out, body folding onto the welcome mat. Its cheery words, "family first," blurred beneath spots of red dripping from my lip. Snowflakes drifted down, melting against my burning skin, disappearing as quickly as my hope. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A car door slammed. And then a voice not my family's. Oh my God. "Clara!" It was Evelyn Carter, our neighbor. She hurried across the yard, coat-flapping phone already in hand. "Stay with me, I'm calling 911. I wanted to answer, but the world tilted. My last memory before blackness was her hand on mine, firm and warm as the slam of my parents' door echoed louder than the sirens racing toward me. When I woke, fluorescent lights blinded me. The smell of antiseptic clung to my nose. Machines beeped steadily nearby. A doctor's face hovered above me, voice calm but clinical. "You're in the hospital. You've suffered a dislocated shoulder, blunt force trauma, and lacerations. We've stabilized you. Dislocated. Trauma." Words that sounded detached, almost sterile compared to the searing pain in my body. I drifted in and out, catching fragments. Injuries consistent with assault. She couldn't have inflicted this on herself. When I was fully conscious, my cheek was stitched, my shoulder bound tightly in a sling, purple bruises blooming like storm clouds across my skin. And still not a single call from my parents, not a single message, not even Vanessa. The only person who showed up was Rachel. She stood by my bed, eyes wet but burning with fury. "They did this to you," she whispered, "and they left you to die." I couldn't answer. My throat was raw, my chest hollow. I stared at the white ceiling, replaying the moment at the door, my mother's voice behind the wall, the silence after my pleas. That silence hurt more than Edward's fist, because it was final. It meant I wasn't just beaten. I was abandoned, and something in me cracked open not with grief, but with clarity. For the first time in my life, I realized if I kept waiting for them to save me, I would never survive them. I was discharged from the hospital the next morning, my body stitched together, but my soul hanging by threads. The nurse gave me a stack of paperwork and a prescription for pain meds, but no instructions for how to survive, knowing your own blood had left you bleeding in the snow. When I turned my phone back on, it lit up with dozens of notifications. Dozens, but not from the people who should have cared. Not from Edward, not from Margaret, not even from Vanessa. Instead, every alert carried her name, Vanessa Monroe. She'd been busy. The first message was from Rachel. "Before you see it somewhere else, I need to show you this." Then a link. My stomach clenched before I even tapped it. Vanessa's private Facebook post, but not private enough. There I was captured in shaky, grainy footage lying on the garage floor, blood streaking down my face. Eyes glazed. The clip was short, deliberately cropped to hide Edward's fists, to erase her silence. The caption, "Please keep my sister in your prayers. She's been struggling and had an episode last night. We did everything we could to calm her down." An episode. My chest hollowed out. She had twisted my assault into a performance. The bruises on my face turned into evidence of my instability. The story wasn't that my father had attacked me. It was that I had broken down, and worse, people believed it. Comments rolled beneath her post like waves. "Praying for you all, Vanessa. It must be so hard caring for her. Mental health is important. Stay strong." Every line stabbed deeper. My suffering was their sympathy card. I called Rachel, my hands shaking. "She's making me look dangerous, like I did this to myself." Her voice was blunt steel. "She's controlling the narrative, Clara, and you're letting her. What am I supposed to do? Go online and argue with her? That'll just make me look crazier." "No," she said. "You gather proof. You fight back where it matters. This isn't family drama anymore. It's assault. And now it's defamation." The thought made my chest tighten. Press charges against my father, against my sister, my family. But then I remembered Evelyn's voice on the porch. "Stay with me, I'm calling 911. The warmth of her hand in mine when my mother wouldn't even open the door. Strangers had cared more than my own blood. Maybe Rachel was right. Maybe family wasn't who you were born to. It was who showed up when you bled. That night I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on an empty folder. I typed one word in the name field, evidence. For a long time, I just stared at it, my pulse pounding. Then I started filling it. First, the ER report. Dislocated left shoulder. Blunt force trauma. Lacerations consistent with physical assault. Injuries could not be self-inflicted. Cold medical text, but damning. Then the photos. My hand trembled as I opened the camera roll. Bruises blooming purple on my jaw. Swelling under my eye. A jagged welt on my shoulder where Edward had grabbed me. I saved them one by one, labeling each with the date and time. Next, screenshots. Every text from Vanessa, every missed call from numbers tied to Mom or Dad, every group chat where they hinted I was unstable. One message from Margaret read, We'll tell people you were upset. It's easier that way. I saved it. Then I copied Vanessa's Facebook post and comments the video cropped to paint me unhinged. The lies preserved in digital amber. But the most chilling proof came from Evelyn. She knocked on my apartment door one evening, bundled in her winter coat, a USB drive in her hand. "I thought you should have this," she said softly. It was her security camera footage. Black and white, grainy but clear enough. Edward storming out of the garage, Vanessa following, neither looking back, and then me crawling into view, dragging my arm-limp blood glistening even through the monochrome filter. Rachel stood behind me, watching as the footage played. Her jaw tightened. "This is enough to start." I swallowed hard. "Start what? Holding them accountable." The words landed heavy. I'd spent my entire life absorbing their blows, financial, emotional, now physical, just to keep the illusion of family intact. Filing a case against them felt like lighting a match in a house soaked with gasoline. But then I remembered. The slam of the front door, locking. My mother's voice silenced. My father's fist. Vanessa's smirk. And I realized the family I thought I was protecting had already abandoned me. By midnight, the folder was full. Evidence stacked neatly, hospital records, photographs, screenshots, social posts, surveillance footage. Proof of who they were when no one was watching. I backed it up to a flash drive, slipping it into my desk drawer with trembling hands. When I closed the laptop, the apartment was silent. No calls, no footsteps. No voices pressing me to forgive. For the first time in my life, the silence felt like mine, and somewhere inside me a quiet fire began to burn. The courthouse smelled faintly of coffee and paper, a sterile calm that belied the storm raging inside me. My sling itched under my blouse, my bruises had yellowed into shadows, but the ache in my shoulder pulsed with every step I took toward the defendant's table. Edward Monroe sat there in a crisp navy suit, jaw-locked eyes sharp as razors. He could have been any businessman waiting to close a deal, not a father charged with assault. Vanessa sat beside him, her glossy hair tucked behind her ears, scrolling on her phone as if this was a tedious errand. Margaret was in the back row, hands folded in her lap, eyes darting anywhere but toward me. I wondered if she'd pray silently for me today, or for him. Rachel squeezed my arm before I took my seat at the plaintiff's table. "You're ready. You have everything you need." I wanted to believe her. When the bailiff called the session to order, the gavel cracked like thunder. My attorney stood first, holding up a small flash drive between two fingers. "Your Honor, this contains hospital records, photographs, text messages, social media posts, and security footage from a neighbor's camera. The evidence will show that the defendant, Edward Monroe, physically assaulted the plaintiff, Clara Monroe. Furthermore, that Vanessa Monroe defamed her online in a deliberate attempt to distort the truth." The judge nodded. "Proceed." One by one, the pieces fell into place. First, the medical report. The doctor's signature underlined the cold description. Injuries consistent with physical assault, not self-inflicted. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Edward shifted in his chair, fists tightening. Then the photographs. My swollen jaw, the bruises blooming dark along my cheek, the angry welt where his hand had yanked my shoulder from its socket. Displayed on the screen, larger than life, they stripped away every excuse he'd rehearsed. Next, Vanessa's Facebook post. The cropped video played in eerie silence, me bloodied on the garage floor, the caption hovering like a dagger. "Pray for my sister, she had an episode." The judge's brow furrowed. Whispers spread like wildfire through the gallery. Then came Evelyn Carter's security footage, grainy, black and white, but damning. Edward storming out of the garage, Vanessa following, the door shutting, and then me dragging myself into the yard, arm hanging, limp blood, visible even through the poor resolution. The air in the courtroom shifted. It was no longer my word against theirs. It was me bleeding on screen while they walked away. Vanessa's smirk faltered for the first time. She shifted in her chair, crossing and uncrossing her legs. Edward glared at the screen jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Margaret stared at her lap as though by not looking she could erase what was undeniable. When it was my turn to testify, my legs felt like stone, but when I opened my mouth, my voice was steady. I didn't want to be here. I began. I didn't want to stand in front of strangers and speak about what my own father did to me. But when your family shuts the door on you while you bleed on their porch, you realize you have two choices: keep bleeding for them or stop. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Even the judge leaned forward. I turned my eyes toward Edward. He glared at me with that same fury I'd grown up fearing. But this time I didn't look away. I'm done bleeding. My attorney asked me questions about the night, about the messages, about the years of financial manipulation. I answered everyone calmly, my words laced with the truth they had spent decades burying. When it was over, Edward's attorney tried to spin, tried to suggest the footage didn't show the full story, tried to claim my injuries might have been exacerbated by a fall of my own making. But every excuse crumbled under the weight of hard evidence. The judge reviewed in silence the courtroom, holding its breath. Finally, his gavel came down. Edward Monroe is guilty of assault. Vanessa Monroe is guilty of defamation. A restraining order will be granted in favor of the plaintiff. Sentencing to follow. The words cracked like lightning splitting open years of silence. Edward's face twisted with rage, but he said nothing. Vanessa blinked rapidly, as if still trying to process that her version of events hadn't stuck. Margaret. She didn't move at all. She just sat there, hands folded, lips pressed tight, eyes averted. The bailiff called for order. Papers shuffled. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. But for me, the world had gone very still. I had walked in as their scapegoat. I walked out as someone who had finally spoken. The weight of their shame wasn't mine to carry anymore. The courthouse doors opened to a crisp winter afternoon, the air sharp with the scent of salt from the icy sidewalks. Reporters murmured in the distance, but no one called my name. I was grateful for that. The last thing I wanted was a headline. I wanted air, space, to breathe without their shadows pressing against my lungs. Margaret didn't follow me out, neither did Edward or Vanessa. They stayed behind, clustered in the wreckage of their lies, their world collapsing in papers and rulings. I didn't look back. Rachel was waiting at the base of the courthouse steps, a paper cup of coffee warming her hands. Her scarf was bright red, defiant against the dull gray sky. When she saw me, she smiled, not wide, not forced, just steady. The kind of smile that said, "You're not alone anymore." She held the coffee out. "You did it." My throat tightened. For so long, I'd carried their weight in silence. Now the only weight pressing on me was the steam rising from that cup. I took it, feeling the warmth seep through my cold fingers. We stood there for a long moment, just breathing, the courthouse looming behind me like a mausoleum of old ghosts. "I don't feel like I won," I admitted softly. "I feel empty, like something died in there." Rachel tilted her head. "Maybe something did. But maybe that's the point. You don't have to keep carrying what they built." Her words settled into me, heavy but freeing. For years, I had clung to the fantasy that if I kept paying for giving, showing up one day, they would see me, love me, choose me. But love doesn't shut the door while you bleed. I thought of Evelyn Carter rushing across the snow, kneeling in her coat, pressing her hand to mine, while my mother stayed folded in her lap. I thought of Rachel sitting beside me in hospital rooms, filling my evidence folder when my hands shook too hard. Family wasn't the people who shared your blood. It was the people who stayed when the blood was on the floor. The weeks after the trial blurred together, papers to sign, lawyers to consult, the restraining order filed. For the first time, I changed the locks on my apartment without worrying who might be offended. Edward called once through a blocked number. I didn't answer. Vanessa sent a text short and cold. "You've ruined us." I stared at it until the screen dimmed, then deleted it. They weren't ruins of my making. They were ruins I'd finally stopped rebuilding. Some nights I still woke sweating, hearing the slam of the garage door, the silence of my mother's voice on the other side of the wall. But then I'd feel the warmth of Rachel's hand on my shoulder, or see Evelyn's porch light across the street, and the fear would loosen its grip. One evening, snow falling soft outside my window, Rachel asked me, If you could go back, would you do it differently? Would you still take them to court? I thought about it. About the years I'd spent kneeling at their altar of approval, about the taste of iron in my mouth, about the welcome mat that read, "Family first," spotted with my blood. Yes, I said finally, because for the first time I chose myself. She nodded, and we sat in the glow of the lamp, the world quiet around us. Months later, a letter arrived from the court confirming the judgment stamped in black ink, permanent restraining order. I folded it carefully, slid it into the same desk drawer that once held the flash drive of evidence. The folder was gone now. I didn't need it anymore. What I kept wasn't proof of their cruelty. It was proof that I had survived it. On the anniversary of that night, I stood on my porch with Rachel watching snow fall across the yard. The air bit at my cheeks, but I wasn't alone in it this time. "I used to think family was the house you were born into," I said quietly. "But now, I think family is the door that opens when you're at your worst." Rachel squeezed my hand. "Then you found yours." I smiled, the kind of smile that didn't hide scars but lived with them. For the first time in my life, I felt the truth of it. I wasn't bleeding anymore. And I wasn't alone.